Today we are in Fort Gaines, Georgia. This sleepy southern town sits atop a high bluff on the Chattahoochee River. One may even say it's way down yonder. In 1814, settlers constructed a wooden stockade, which would be upgraded several times over the next century. When the Civil War broke out, Fort Gaines had a unique role to play. Two tremendous cannons were placed on that overlook, and because of the long, straight stretch of river south of it, this small outpost could hold off an entire navy if need be. There was no ship that could sail the river that couldn't be turned into splinters with a few well-placed shots. One of the prized gems here in town is the Sutton's Corner Museum, and this is where we start our journey. The museum houses hundreds of artifacts from the local community, and many of them have been handed down with incredibly unique stories. One such story is that of Willie Turner, a farmer whose stables were adjacent to the fort and its cannons. The tale goes that Willie was doing the dirty work of being a farmer when the alarm was raised. An enemy ship was sailing up the river and someone needed to man the guns. But Willie didn't exactly have the right tool for the job. This is one of the original cannons here at the fort. Now, Willie's story of defense gets very interesting when you realize that when the soldiers left, they took with them the device used to fire it, called a linstock, which is a 5-foot-long piece of wood that has a hole drilled into it and a burning rope attached. Now, when you fire the cannon off, there's a 1/2-inch hole on top that you can reach over with the linstock and touch it off. But when you do, it produces a volcano of face-melting flames. That's why the reason for the long stick. So in order for Willie to keep his fingers and face intact, he had to make do. In fact, he had to make do with doo-doo. This is the manure fork of Willie Turner. It's an original piece. Has some of the original leather wrappings here, some really nice blacksmith forge welds up here, and this is supposedly the very piece he used to fire the cannons. Story goes, Willie was in the horse stalls pulling out all the horse squeezings. Alarm goes up. There's an enemy ship coming. Willie runs to the fort, taking his poo-encrusted tool, wrapping a rope around it, and using it to fire the cannons off. Now, throughout history, there have been all sorts of tall tales handed down. Some true, most probably blatant lies. But is there anything about this artifact, or what we can do, to lend a little bit of veracity to Willie's story? Well, funny that you mentioned that. Here on the bottom, as I was inspecting this, if you'll notice that close to the socket, there are black markings. I thought they were staining to start with, but upon closer inspection, they appear to be scorch marks. Could this be scorch marks from the cannon when Willie fired it? Well, we're going to do a little bit of experimental archaeology. We're going to remake this fork, and then we're going to use it to fire off a big old cannon, and we're going to see if these scorch marks match. And then maybe we'll have a little bit more insight into the story of Willie Turner and his poo fork. So now we have our very own Willie Turner manure fork. Now I'm pretty proud of this one. If you look, the construction of it is just the way that the antique was done. Forge weld up top, folded socket handle. We put a stick on here and we are now ready to fork all the manure in Calhoun County, Georgia. Now, here's the scenario. Willie's working in the stall. The alarm goes up, the British are coming. So you don't have the linstock, but you take your manure fork and you grab a piece of sisal rope. Now this would have been your slow match. Now normally it would have been soaked in saltpeter, but you can even get by without it being there. So very quickly, you run out there, you grab your rope. You need to wrap it around the front here. couple of times just to lock it in place. And now really you need to hold it to one fork. So you can do this very quickly with just a piece of wire. Again, this isn't a great solution. This is kind of the duct tape of the day. But once you've done that, a couple of wraps around the handle for the excess, and now if you light that, you can very accurately touch the cannon and hopefully keep all your fingers in your face. So now the only thing left to do is actually use this guy, and we're going to see if maybe when we fire a cannon with this piece, if there's a bit of a scorch mark on this bottom that might lend a little bit of credibility to the story of Willie Turner's homemade linstock. Here in South Georgia, it's a quiet life, you know, mundane. A lot of people would say boring, but you know, it's got its own quiet charms. I enjoy it. The wonderful air and game, hunting and fishing. Get a chance to shoot a few guns. It's a good life. I bet you're wondering, where did he get a cannon? Though this isn't as huge as the Fort Gaines guns, it will do for us. This cannon was built by my mentor, J. Penfield Riekert, in the early 1970s. It was used for reenactments and is now a part of my permanent collection. She sports a 1.5-inch bore and has a fine hand-cast silver eagle to boot. Fire the disco! It works! So we have had a successful firing of the cannon. The British have been driven from Fort Kickass, and now all that remains is to see if our test piece matches the artifact that we looked at in the museum. And folks, if you'll take a look at the scorch marks and the pattern. Now I cannot say what did or did not happen on that day way back in history. Did Willie Turner run from the stable and defend Fort Gaines with a homemade linstock made from a Manure fork? I don't know. But I'll tell you, from the evidence we've looked at, it is absolutely entirely possible. This is what we call experimental archaeology, trying to understand the ways of the past by actually performing the ways of the past. Folks, I want to thank you all so much for being with me here on this ride. I hope to see you again, and as always, I'm Trenton, and this is Black Iron.